Before I put the hub on, I'm actually going to wipe the spindle off, wipe all the grease off the spindle, all the old grease, make sure everything's clean. The back part of the spindle, the backmost part, this is where the seal rubs against, where the rubber of the seal rubs against. You want to make sure there's no grooves in that. If there's a groove in that, you may need to replace your spindle. This next step right here, this is where the inner race sits, or the inner race of the innermost bearing. And then it tapers down, and then this part right here, this is where the inner race of the outer bearing sits. Hub's ready to slide into place. Wiggle it in place. There it is. Now I'm going to pack grease into my outer bearing, slide my outer bearing in. I now have my outer bearing fully packed with grease. I'm now going to just tilt the hub, slide it into place. It'll kind of nest, it'll slide onto the spindle, and it'll nest into that raceway. And then I'm going to put on that washer. You know, I'm actually going to wipe this washer off on a paper towel first. Make sure it's nice and clean. When you put this washer on, you will notice that one side of it is a little shinier. And that is because it has been against the race versus the nut. I try to put the washer back in the way it came off. So I can see that this is my shinier side out of the two. I'm going to put that towards the bearing. It's going to slide down the groove. And then I'm ready to put my nut onto place. Again, I'm just going to wipe some of the grease off the nut. It's old dirty grease. I've put plenty of nice clean new grease in there. This nut also has a smooth shiny side and a rough cast side. You want the smooth shiny side to be against that washer. That way that's been ground completely perpendicular to the threaded part, so you know that it'll apply an even load. So we're going to thread this into place. All the way up. Finish wiping my hands. And now we're going to tighten that bearing. My method of tightening the bearing is as follows. I take my large screwdriver, make sure it's nice and clean, it's going to be near that bearing. I'm going to put it in the slot of that nut, and I'm going to turn it as hard as I can. My hand's actually kind of greasy, so I'm going to have to clean this hand off before I do this. Alright, so I'm going to tighten the screwdriver as tight as I can while I'm turning this hub. As I turn this hub, it's going to help those bearings seat, and I'll notice that as I'm turning it, each time I turn it, I can kind of turn the screwdriver an extra little step until I get to the point where I can't really do it anymore. Kind of spin it, turn the screwdriver as tight as I can. Maybe even help with the other hand a little bit and make sure it's there. That's about as tight as you want that bearing to be. Now, I'm going to get my Allen wrench, turn that hub so that the notch lines up, put that Allen wrench in, and tighten it down. And when you have just the hub, when there's not very much other mass on there, like the brake rotor or the wheel, it's not going to feel like it turns very well. But once you get everything else into place, and that grease gets in and lubricates well, you'll find that it will turn very smoothly. If it doesn't turn smoothly, there might be grit or something in one of those races. So this there's a torque spec on this little bolt. I just make it reasonably tight with an Allen wrench, and that's good enough for me. And now that's all in place. Wiped off the inside of the dust cap. Now ready to hammer the dust cap into place. Gently tapping all the way around. And once that's in place, put the brake rotor back on. Make sure we line it up so that we can get the two little hold-down screws into the rotor. Oh. One thing I should probably point out with the rotor, I pointed it out before, these rotors get changed on this car quite frequently, being a track car. so it was easy to pull the rotors off. On a car that has had the rotors on for quite some time, there are two threaded holes also in the rotor. Once you undo the little bolts that hold the rotor on, you can take some bolts, I believe they are M8, and as you thread them in, put a socket wrench on them, it forms a press. So as it screws into the threaded hole, it's going to push against the hub and pop your rotor off. So it has a built-in removal press, or a method for removing these rotors if they get rusted on. Little blob of anti-seize on each one. Now ready to screw these into place. And these should be pretty snug. You don't want to strip them out. They're a pain in the butt to get out if you strip the heads. So, but they should be, snug enough that the rotor's not going anywhere. Obviously, it's your wheel nuts on the studs that hold the rotor really in place. Next step is to put the caliper back on. Cut your string, undo your knot, undo the wire, whatever's holding the caliper up. Get your caliper into place. Get two long bolts. And if you have an NA car, it's going to be a slightly different process, slightly different size caliper. I make these pretty tight. And of course, stopping is important. See how that feels nice. Before I put the pads back in, I'm going to take some brake cleaner, clean off the surface of the rotor that I've been touching. What you don't want on your brake rotors is grease or oil. Anything that's slippery. Do the same on the back side. Now I'm ready to put my pads back in. One pad. Second pad, close the trap door. Squeeze it in the middle, push the top under, let go. Everything's back together.